Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Practitioners Podcast. We're applying Jesus-style disciple making to everyday life. This episode and all of our episodes are powered by Navigators Church Ministries, which focuses on helping churches make disciples who can make disciples. For more information or to get connected, go to navigatorschurchministries.org. Friends, we have got an incredible episode planned for you today, and I'm going to start off with what some people might call a reductionist thought. And that is this: when it comes down to everything, there are really only two choices. Now, before you hit the brakes or turn off the podcast, just think about it, right? It's either iOS or Android. It's either Coke or Pepsi. It's either Crest or Colgate. It's really Ford or Chevy. It's really the American League or the National League. When it comes down to it, there are really just two choices to make. It's this or it's that. And I'm going to suggest to you today, Justin and I are going to suggest to you today, that it's true with disciple making. So Justin, walk us into this water where there are really only two choices when it comes to disciple making.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right when you think about it, right, at first. Just like as you're talking, I love that you brought all those examples in, because I think it's true broadly, but it's also true in disciple making. And it's not obvious. Like, if we were just to kind of stop here and ask everybody, well, what are those two choices in disciple making? My guess is that most people would have a hard time coming up with two, right? They'd have a hard time coming up with two ways. And it goes a little bit back to an episode we did a couple episodes ago around, the choice most disciple makers never make.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, how do you make a disciple? Well, if you don't understand there's different ways, and there's two main categories of ways that disciple makers can be made, then you're not going to be able to come up with these two. But we're going to lay them out for you today and just kind of talk through them. So the first option around how to make a disciple would be kind of the standardized disciple making approach, right? Or just standardized disciple making. And it is by far the most popular way to make disciples in the West. Another way that we could talk about it, we could talk about as proficient disciple making, or we could talk about it as wholesale disciple making. It's the type of disciple making that is the easiest to do. It's the simplest in a lot of ways, and it's easier to scale at a quick level. So all those things sound like, wow, Justin, let me know what this is, because this is what we want to do. And maybe you do, maybe you do. But let's just understand them both. So this type of disciple making, standardized disciple making, is where the thing carries the weight of disciple making. Now, what is the thing? Well, it's different. It depends, right? The thing is always in addition to the Bible. Typically, it's a book, it's curriculum, it's written by a pastor, a faith hero. And the thing is what does kind of the work. It sets the pace, it sets the agenda, it communicates about what needs to be covered and when it needs to be covered. Now, Tony, practitioners of the standardized disciple making approach will argue persuasively about the need for tracks to run on. And we got to have something, they'll say, to help us know what to do so that we can get into it together. And the thing provides that in this approach, right? They emphasize the need of what I really consider now the modern rally cry for disciple making, which is it needs to be so simple that anyone can do it. That comes out of this approach or that viewpoint, right? That most often the way this is executed is discipleship groups are formed. Groups of 3, 4, or 5 can happen in smaller, can happen in bigger, but those are the most common. And disciples are invited to move through the thing, that curriculum, that book, that Bible study for a specific amount of time. Now, there are some clear advantages to standardized disciple making. And I mentioned a few of them already, right? It's easy, it's simple, it scales really quickly, because what they're asked to do after that is, okay, after you've been in this for a year, 6 months, year and a half, whatever it is, we want you to go and do a similar group with people that you gather together. And so we can see the scaling of it really fast. It feels comfortable to most people because it feels a little similar to a small group. But this is kind of how it runs, right? And people can absorb the information quickly, the thing quickly, and then they just start doing it, right? So, Tony, that's kind of the standardized disciple making approach. I'm guessing you've experienced that before. I'm
For
guessing you have
sure.
thoughts about it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the thing is that the standardized disciple making approach, it makes disciples of the tool that you're using, the thing that you're using. So it makes disciples of the book. And of course, that's the book is for sure, or the curriculum, it's going to point people to Jesus. We're not suggesting that that's not the case. But the reality is when you think about standard, what you think about are rules and regulations and I recently was talking to a pastor the other day who's like, "Oh, I use this program and it's 6 months, then 6 months, right?" And so it's 6 months where you learn the curriculum, 6 months where you teach the curriculum to someone else, 6 months where then you teach it on to the next person. And and it becomes a kind of more of a standardized process. It's groups, and then you start your own groups. And I'm benefiting currently. I have a group that I meet with at the gym in the morning on Wednesdays, and it's essentially a small group that started out of one of those standardized approaches.
Okay.
And I will tell you, out of that group, there were five of us. Two of us went and started another group, but the other three were like, no, we just really like this group because they weren't actually trying to be replicatable disciples. What they were trying to do is just enjoy the thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
standardized disciple making is really hard for me because people aren't very standard.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's just the reality is that the road that you choose to go on, if there's two roads to choose from,
Yeah.
the road you choose shapes the disciples that you make.
Yeah.
Right? So the road you choose shapes the disciples you make. And standardized disciple making is just not very reproducible. It's not very sustainable from my vantage point. It's not very, I mean, you can see my biases all
We can
over
see
this.
Tony loves this road.
Here's the problem, Justin. Let me just rant for a second.
Okay.
Okay. This is the quintessential consumerism in North American churches.
Hmm.
Right. And one of the things that I believe, my buddy Matt Reynolds says this all the time, what you win them with is what you win them to.
Yep.
And so if you're not winning them with a vision of generational disciple making, then what you're winning them with is a standardized disciple making process, which is really like, hey, come do this thing and you're a disciple.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't go far enough for me. It promotes the culture in America that is most frustrating for me as a disciple maker, and I don't like it. How about that? I'll just put it all out there.
Tell us how you really feel. I mean, I think half of the audience is gone at this point because they're like, this is our road. This is what we're all about. Let
It's
me
a good
push
start.
back a little bit, right? So,
Got its advantages to start.
yeah. So I think, though, that they would say, people on the standardized disciple making road, what they would say is, no, it's the same. Like, we still have that vision of generational disciple making. And the way that we see that being fulfilled is getting these groups going and helping them grow within these standardized groups. And then they go out and impact others, which is just what they're supposed to do. And this standardized approach, or the thing, is just a tool that we use to help people move in that direction. And my guess is you're unconvinced by that way of thinking.
My response to that would be is if the only tool you have is a hammer, the entire world starts to look like a nail.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is that when we have the thing, whatever the thing is, right. And I'm not saying it's not a good piece of a puzzle, which is a much bigger puzzle, but we talked about this not too long ago in one of our episodes. It's really hard to be contextual when you only have one tool.
Yep. Yep.
And so this standardized version has a really big top of the funnel to it, but they don't make it very far out of the top. Right.
Yeah.
And so we got a lot of people swimming at the surface instead of going deep. And so what I prefer about the second road, which we'll get to in just a second, is that we're trying to build master carpenters so that, hey, you can be good with this tool or that tool or this tool. And if you want to use that tool, great, but also use 16 other tools because there's a lot of people who just aren't going to fit into a 16-week program that is designed to take you through the gospels and then teach you how to take someone else through the gospels. Like, it's disciple making is more than that. And on top of that, now I'm just going, is that we don't see Jesus doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got to be more life on life than that. Because
Okay.
when the thing ends, so does the relationship in most cases.
Yep. Yep. All right.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Let's move on to the second road, right? So everything reduces down to two. So if standardized disciple making is the first approach, the second approach, the alternative to that, is known as the tool-based approach, tool-based disciple making. Okay, so tool-based disciple making, we could also call it customized disciple making or creative disciple making, and it requires the disciple maker to be equipped and skilled in using different tools. And these tools include things like illustrations or acronyms. We tend to talk about them in terms of pass-onables, right? We want them to impact and equip the person that we're discipling, right? And so we're not just looking at impacting them, but what sets the agenda, and this is one of the main differences here, is what sets the agenda in the tools-based discipling road is the disciple maker in collaboration with the disciple figures out what's best for us to talk about now, what's best for us to move into, what do you really need help with, how can we develop and equip you so that you are a mature version of yourself and a mature disciple, someone who follows Jesus well, so that you can go do it with others, right? So I'm not trying to make a copy of me. I'm not trying to make a copy of a thing, right? I'm trying to help that person become mature in their faith. Now, we do use tools, and I keep saying we, so I'm tipping my hand a little bit, but the tools are used in this approach, but the tools aren't the point. And so the response to this idea of, well, we need tracks to run on, I would say, well, the track that people run on this road is the relationship itself. So the relationship itself is what moves forward into something. The
Hmm.
tool isn't the point, rather, it's a way to remember and pass the point on. Okay, so they work tirelessly to equip the disciples. Primarily, it's in one on one or one on two contexts, and then they go out and help others do the same thing. Tony, I'm about to cough again, so say something here.
Well, I think one of the unique parts about this is that it doesn't fit so cleanly into the kind of the standardized process. So it's going to be very individualized, it's going to be very customized. It's going to be a little bit slower or even a lot slower. But the difference is that I tend to see in this customized approach, one of the things that happens is people pick up the vision and they own it, right? And so if I was going to contrast this versus the other option, is that in the tool-based disciple making, we make, I say we, but these kind of disciple makers make the disciple an owner of the tool, not a user of the program.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's absolutely right. There's some advantages here, and the advantages are some of what you're saying. There's also some disadvantages, right? Like, this is harder on disciple makers who have never been discipled in this way,
Yep.
right? It's much easier to use a thing to move through a process with somebody. But what we don't often consider is what's easiest or what serves the person that we're discipling the most. And, the standardized approach can be like criticized for moving towards uniformity. The tools-based approach can be criticized for, like, well, it's slow. There's no two people that are the same, so I need to figure this out for everybody. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, we have to relate to them as an individual or a couple individuals if you have a triad going on. But the point of it is we're developing that person or those couple people to a place where they are mature and look like a mature version of themselves, not a mature version of us. Now, how do we distinguish? Because even the standardized approach would say, well, yeah, this curriculum, this book is just a tool that we're using. I would propose that the difference between a tool, the way the tools-based road talks about it, and a tool versus the thing on the standardized road is the thing acts more like a machine. It does the work for the disciple maker, right? You can interchange anyone into that seat. And if they're using the thing the way that they're supposed to, then it acts like a machine. But a tool is something where the person who's using it, the hand of the craftsman that it's in, makes the difference in terms of whether it's helpful or not so helpful in that person's life or in that relationship. Now, Tony, there's a lot of downsides to each of these, right? Like, I don't want to paint a picture that one is good all the time, the other one's all bad, anything like that. But the reality is that I think what we're trying to get across in this episode is there are two choices.
Yeah.
And my hope is that as people are listening to this podcast, I'm not trying to persuade you. And of course, I do have an opinion and a bias towards one over the
I
other.
am trying to persuade them, Justin.
Yes, you are.
I just, if we're going to be honest about it.
But the reality is that if you're traveling either road, that's helpful for the kingdom.
For sure.
Right? Discipling, no matter how you're doing it, is helpful for the kingdom. But I know myself and I know our listeners, like, we don't just want to be helpful in an unintentional way. We want to be as helpful as we possibly can and as aligned to Jesus in his way as we possibly can. And so, even our last episode, when we looked at 7 tests of how do we decide how to make a disciple, you should really spend some time on, like, well, okay, here are these 2 roads. Which one, as I look at those 7 tests, or as I, look in the scriptures at what Jesus did, which one do I feel like I want to be on and move down? And even if I'm on one right now and I want to move to a different one, doesn't mean we just scrap everything and all those relationships. But how do we graciously towards the reality of the other one? But again, I think it's that consideration that we're going after.
Yeah, let me just say this. I do apologize if I came off a little strong on that first take. But here's where it comes from. It comes from a place of actually doing it. Like I did it. I was the adult education director at a really big church where we tried to create a standardized disciple making tool. And it was the most frustrating thing in my life, not because we didn't have great numbers, but because we didn't have great transformation.
Hmm.
And so I want for you the same thing I want for me. And that is when I use my time to build the kingdom of God, I want to be the most efficient transformational tool that God will use. And
Yep.
at this point in my life, one path clearly has given me that result and the other didn't. So
Yep.
maybe that's a Tony issue. I'm willing to accept that. But either way, doing something is better than doing nothing. And a
Yep.
lot of churches, I think more so now than ever before, are really realizing like we got to do something. So
Yeah.
do something and
Right.
then wrestle with it.
Yep. Yeah, I totally hear that, and I know your story, Tony. I know where that comes from. I think for our listeners, like, this episode might make you uncomfortable. And I would just encourage you, like, reach out to us if you want more conversation around it. Talk to somebody else who maybe is on a different road from you if you're thinking, well, maybe I'm not on the road I should be on. But I think there's a nuanced conversation to be had here, right?
Mhm.
It's not all black and white for every context and every situation. There's value on both roads. But again, we need to figure out, well, man, what is God calling us to? And what is it that Jesus would have us do if his way of making disciples is the best way? And I fully believe that. How do we get as close to that as we can?
Yeah. So our takeaway for today, choose your path. Don't drift down it. And our action step is exactly what Justin just said. Map out your current disciple making path and evaluate it. Is that producing the results that you want in your relationships? More than anything, Justin and I want to help you continue to build the kingdom and make disciples the way Jesus did. So until next time, go out and make disciples.